Good morning. Welcome. This is Angela Coulter, your consciousness transformation guide, um, originator of Trinity Energy Progression, bringing you this week's Living the Shift. So let's talk about fear. And I'm trying to pull this up here so I can see comments because I tend to not see them on here, strangely enough. Anyway, I wanted to talk about this because this is a big topic and it's something that's came up recently on a little conclave weekend of what we call deep diving that we did a couple weeks ago. And Sarah Segavignoni and I spoke about this on our Monday morning podcast, Ascended World. So this is sort of a continuation and things that have come up. This is a really good topic because we have this challenge with looking at fear and anger, anxiety, and stuff like that. We, especially in the spiritual community. So what happens is this: we get to this idea of understanding how fear and anxiety, judgment, shame, blame, guilt, doubt, sorrow, pain, all of that stuff, that's all ego based, what we call ego based, right? And so when looking things from a larger perspective, the understanding is the ego's job, my understanding is the ego's job has been to explore individuality and separation. And all the energies and emotions of individuality and separation come from the ego, not from the higher self. So think about it. It's whatever makes us in individuals is created out of those energies: fear, anger, anxiety, all that other stuff. Judgment, blame, guilt, doubt, sorrow, shame, all that kind of stuff. Anything but wholeness and unconditional love, right? So we exist in our base form. Our foundation is truly wholeness, as the whole of the universe, as the whole of divine consciousness. And then we create our individual identities and egos, and we have so many layers of that we've explored in duality. So in understanding that, it's not to vilify the ego. A lot of people vilify it, but the the thing to look at is to understand the connection of what the energies are around the ego, what the motivation is of the ego, and then to say, okay, so if I am, or as I am remembering my consciousness as the whole, because I've never not been that, it's just that I've forgotten in this identity exploration and separation. Like, what is there for me to see and do so that I can shift that? And so we have created a very dense, separate based kind of existence here. It's one of the most dense and most separate and most I don't want to say forgotten. One of the most dense and separate states where we have forgotten the most in the part of our consciousness that has embodied these meat jackets. And so I'm going to also say, on a side note here, anybody who puts in a comment, I apologize if I don't see it because I don't know why it's not coming up on my phone today. I see that we're live and I see that there are people on, and I just am not, I don't see any comments. So if you type something in and I don't respond, it's not because I'm ignoring you, it's because I'm just not being shown this. My phone's not even showing the video today. So it says there's comments on the left side, but I haven't seen those for weeks here. So weird stuff with Facebook. Anyhow, that was just a little side note. But anyhow, so when we look at the whole individuality, and by the way, if you put comments in and I don't see them till afterward, I will answer them after. Oh, see, Gloria came up. Good morning, Gloria. So good. Good, we're seeing them. So we when we start to look at things from the perspective of the ego's purpose has been separation and identity, because identity is I am, there's a me and a not me. There's a me that's specific to me, and then there's stuff that's not me, so that I'm very unique as this combination of energies that create me. And we have that at the soul level. I mean, anything under, yeah, this is how I understand it. Anything that has an ego, anything that has an identity has an ego. And even it might be different than what we have here, But we've had different levels of lessons at different levels of consciousness, because we look at consciousness in this concentricity, and as we do that, we realize that we have egos at all these different levels that we've created. So it's to recognize that. So the first step is this. The first thing we start saying is, oh, the ego's bad. The ego wants to hurt people. It wants to create a hierarchy. It wants to, um, yeah, it wants to do a lot of things like that. Exclude, basically, anything in exclusion, including itself. But it's not bad. It is simply doing its job, which we created it for. And it has served its incredible purpose of what it's doing. And so the key is, as we're completing, and like in this deep dive that we talked about on Monday on Ascended World. So if you missed that, go back and watch. But we did this deep dive weekend almost, oh, it's 2 weeks ago now. We really went to a place where we were looking at things at a collective as well as the individual soul level. And we looked at stuff that made us really uncomfortable. Because and uncomfortable, by the way, is ego based, because again, means that there's something outside of us, something that could be feared, something that we don't know. And I love using Marie Curie's quote, we fear what we don't understand. We fear what we don't remember. Like, I like to go further and say we fear what we don't yet remember, because it's like, it's scary to the ego, because the ego feels like there's something out of its control. The more we come into consciousness, the more we come into remembrance, the more we remember, we create our realities. We create everything that we see, feel, hear, experience. And when we can take that full responsibility and understand that everything is a part of us, then it's the fear shifts, right? And when we shift our perception on what fear is, anxiety, anger, regret, resentment, guilt, doubt, sorrow, pain, envy, all that kind of stuff, separation based guilt, ego based stuff. When we start to see it for what it is, the next step that tends to happen is a little tiny egoic thing slips in, because it's like, oh, you can't get rid of me all the way. And it says, oh, well, if I'm supposed to be a spiritual person, then I am not supposed to be angry. I'm not supposed to be, fearful about anything. I'm not supposed to be upset or sick or whatever. And so then we try to repress it. And guess what? Repression is exclusion, which then connects it to the ego. And, like, these are the clues. So here's the thing, whatever we have it, it's not to repress it. Because guess what? When we repress it, we are then perpetuating the depth of separation through the ego in that way. And if our purpose and our mission is to complete this level of density and separation in this way, then why would we put any energy into I apologize for yawning. It's not because I'm tired. It's because there's a lot of stuff flowing through today. um, that happens a lot on this, right? So the thing is, if we want to, if we're ready, if we feel like we're ready to move beyond this, then it is really time for us to move beyond this. And so here's the thing. When we come to that realization, and when we come to the understanding that if I repress anything, I am going to perpetuate separation and density and duality. And if I commit myself to the purpose of being in wholeness and oneness and holding that space in unconditional love and wholeness and acceptance, that means it's for me to accept all of the stuff that I have held in the closet in fear and anger and resentment and guilt and doubt and sorrow and shame, all that stuff. And it's not for me to hide it, but it is for me to utilize it as a tool instead of having it drive me through propulsion, which is what we've gotten into the really deep habit of doing. Like feeling like we have to be motivated through some kind of lack, right? Which is that separation, duality based stuff. And so if we're conscious to shift that, then part of it then it really has to do with seeing it come up, allowing it to come up, observing it, embracing it, to say, I love you as a part of me. It's been a fabulous part of this journey, and you are complete, because when you do that, you dissipate it, not repressing it or ignoring it or pretending it's not there. When we repress or ignore or pretend something is not there, it means we judge it at some level, right? So, for example, we were doing some, like I've been talking about, these deep dive sort of hypnosis sessions that we're calling consciousness transcendence sessions, way beyond what people call past life regression. Past life regression. It's like entire consciousness uh, transcendence of individual, to see each layer and everything else. But anyhow, when we were doing that, one of the things that we see, and I see this all the time, and we've done 4 of these this year, which is the small group of us, and I've seen it with so many I've worked with. I've seen it with people I've taken on retreat, and it's something that we're consciously looking at, especially in Trinity energy progression, which we talk about this all where we talk about this all the time. But if, like, it's really important to say, okay, come on out, let me look at it. We judge it so deeply because then we feel like we're not a good person, right? And so we have this judgment that is really embedded to say, for me to complete this mission and be like this earth angel, or I have to be this spiritual savior, or I have to be this, I can't have any of these separation based energies or emotions. I'm not allowed to have fear or anger or resentment or envy or guilt or doubt, sorrow, shame, pain. None of that is allowed. So if I have it, I have to be ashamed of it, which then, guess what? Perpetuates the duality and separation. So then I put it in the closet and repress it, which again perpetuates the duality and separation. And so we continue this perpetuation, and then we scratch our heads and say, well, why do we keep on crashing and cycling around? Well, the thing is to complete the cycle. We're done with the cycling. And to do that is for us to truly allow everything to come up to the surface, to say, okay, I see you. I thank you for what it is you've provided me. And now I don't need this anymore. Or I allow you to be complete, and I allow you to be a part of me, and I embrace you. And again, as you do that, the force of resistance or separation that you have put into creating that then disappears when you accept it into yourself, right? Because then all that energy goes away, and then it goes away in its existence. So that's so we talk about that in terms of like good and bad, good and evil, what we consider like light and dark. We talk about doing that with the darkness. But the key is truly, because if we are saying that we're only the light, we're living and we are just existing in exclusion in that too, right? To say that I only want to be the light was created with the dark and duality, right? So there's wholeness and it's completion together. And so it's for us to say all of, like that I am all of this. I have been all of this. And that has been my job as an identity, as an ego, right? As an ego, even at the soul level, as an ascended master, it was still part of my identity and experience and expression. And that's beautiful and it's perfect. And now I'm not going to hold that like in shame anymore. I'm not going to hide it. And it's for me to look at it, to embrace it, and to let it go. Because, or let it just be reassimilated. Because, one of the sessions we did, and by the way, I talk about sessions individually, excuse me, which were with each individual that held a different part of the seed, but they're all collective just as much as they are individual. I mean, and in fact, we had to go in multiple times because it's uncomfortable. We were like, oh, okay, well, I don't want to look at the lower self or the soul, the individual soul. I'm just going to go even higher. It's easier. Believe it or not, it's easier, right? Because, oh, then I can see it all and I don't have any judgment. But when I'm immersed in it, it's challenging for us to see beyond that. So part of the thing here, part of what I want to talk about is our real, our true mission is really getting beyond that. Our true mission is to break ourselves out of the cycle that we've been in for a very long time. And it's perfect. It's been perfect for the bigger picture. The series of dimensions on Earth that we've created were specifically created by us, or else we wouldn't be here, because we're there at the beginning, we're there at the end. It's like allowing the project, this part of the project, to complete, but it's a small piece of this much bigger picture. It's like saying, and we tend to have this thing of like, oh, Earth is it, Earth is the center of the universe. We still have that sort of thought in how we work, but it's really like saying that one website is the entire internet, and it's not. Very one piece of it. Not that it's an unimportant piece, but it's a piece of it. Not actually, yeah, it is a piece that interrelates with other pieces. Um, so we have this project that's going on, and it's an intergalactic, interdimensional project, and Earth was created for a very specific purpose, and we have completed that. We've fallen in love so much. The understanding is that we've fallen in love so much with the experience of feeling an exclusion at this level of density that we have cycled around, and we say we put ourselves in victimhood, which, by the way, is exclusion, separation, and ego. And we then say, oh, we don't want to do this again. Up, exclusion, repression, and ego. And so we repress it, we deny it, and we create it again by doing that. So, as we were sort of talking, Sarah and I were talking about on Ascended World on Monday, how, like, as we created everything around us to be a reflection back to ourselves, what happens in the mirror is everything sort of is backwards to what it actually is. So it's a backward reflection. So this whole world, this whole existence is really sort of backwards to what we think it is because of that. And it's something that takes a while to get our sort of our remembrance wrapped around. But then once you start to navigate it that way, then it becomes a lot easier. And so to look at this, to say, okay, the more I resist, or like, because we can say, oh, I can accept this, or I can see this in the bigger picture, or I can observe this, but I can't observe that. Well, guess what? When we can acknowledge that all of those energies and emotions come from the ego and separation, and that perpetuation of duality at this level of separation, of density, when we come to keeping that at the forefront of our mind, then we recognize that any emotion such as that at the deepest levels of our consciousness, whenever they even come up as a little tiny ping, that is truly a message of something for us to shift, to allow, to come into observance. So when we are in observance of it, then we don't say, oh, I can't, because here's the repression. The repression part is, oh, what kind of person would I be if I'm doing spiritual work and I get angry or fearful or jealous or whatever? Like, I have to repress that because that's not good. Judgment, separation, and exclusion. Instead, a way to look at it would be, okay, so I have this feeling that I see and honor within me, and I'm going to not give it any energy. I'm not going to give it any power by even resisting it or letting it fuel me. I'm going to simply observe it and say, so what does that tell me about myself? Like, where is there something that's still in exclusion or lack within me to shift so that I don't have that anymore? And thank you for the message to myself. Thank you, ego. Thank you, anger. Thank you, fear. Thank you, envy, blame, judgment, shame. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for giving me the message that I've forgotten. So now that I can remember. And when you start to do that, it's funny how things shift so quickly and easily, and they become so fluid. And that's like a very interesting, a very important step in terms of how we are the change, right? To be the change is to stop perpetuating those habits that we've had in the past, right? One of the things that I have been shown to, and gotten into the habit, pushed myself from higher consciousness into the habit of doing this year, has been looking at anything that I look at as outside of me and as an exclusion, whether it's an energy or emotion, a fear or anything like that. And then I look at it and say, okay, what is it that this is a target of? Like, what am I afraid of? What am I nervous? So death is a big one for people, right? And death is simply like leaving these meat jackets to go back to the whole of who we are, even the soul, or even bigger. And then decide if we want to reincarnate here, someplace else, or both. And, did we complete the lessons in the separation and that kind of stuff all in an instant? And so it's a graduation of sorts, but yet we have so much built around death because we love it here so much that we then, have all these motivations about avoiding death. So therefore, here's the thing. The more we are motivated by these kind of energies, the more we stay motivated by fear, of any kind. So we could say fear of death, right? So if I'm afraid of dying, anything that I could possibly conceive, the ego could conceive of like causing me to die, will be something I could fear, right? Where in reality, I could just drop dead right here, right now, this second, and because I'm done, and I just step right out, and that's it. So it doesn't even matter what I'm doing, because I could just go when it's time. There's no, like, and we've gotten into that. We have these habits of, oh, this person died before their time because we can perceive them to be young and healthy and vibrant, and then something happened that seemed to make them a victim, and then blah blah, victimhood again, separation, exclusion, ego. It was a creation. It was a creation to have a lesson or a message for the individual and or people around them. So or it was just the time for them to go. Like I literally knew somebody once in their 20s who they found sitting up in his house with a cup of coffee on the arm of the chair, dead. And there was no drugs in his system. There was nothing. His heart just stopped, and that was it. I mean, he was literally like, he didn't even look like he was even in pain. He was sitting there, and I think his hand was on his coffee cup, and he just had died sitting there. You can do that. And so everybody around them feels like, oh, I have a loss, I have a hole because that person's not there with me. But that makes them actually more so themselves outside of the meat jacket and then embracing their wholeness. And you can access them at any time because they're part of you anyway, because we are illusion just as everything around us is. That was something we talked about on Monday on Ascended World. And that is something that many like sort of have to gasp at to think about. Where the ego says, what? I'm an illusion? Yeah, we are. And a very important one as well. So the thing is to accept that without resistance. And that was something for me to look at when we did that deep dive weekend. So to say, okay, well, when I'm done, I cease to exist. And the ego had to mourn itself. I grieve and allow it to see that and then realize that, yeah, it's already happened. And it's still beautiful and everything's still perfect and incredible. So these are really deep things for us to look at. They're very deeply ingrained habits. And so what happens is, like I said, as we progress in this, if we commit ourselves truly to existing in that place of wholeness and higher consciousness, one of the most important things, my understanding, is to not like to basically see what those energies and emotions for what they are when they come up, to realize they're a tool for us to remember and to say, wait a second, okay, what was the lesson here? Is there something still for me to remember or learn through that? And can I, let me complete this now so that we can reassimilate it and it does not have power over me anymore. Because anytime we are projected or propelled by an emotion or energy, then it has power over us because it can force us into a direction, right? How many people said, oh, well, my anger propelled me. Well, how about if we just committed to propelling ourselves or just doing or being without the need for propulsion, and just simply go by guidance, right? Anytime we have a hesitation or we have doubts, that's all ego, right? So if we really change that, I mean, think about this game we could create with ourselves. And so like the thing was, it's like, wow, once I actually came to face with that fear from the ego of, oh, well, when I'm done with this, when I'm truly done with this, I cease to exist. And by the way, yeah, I'm an illusion anyway, right? When I faced that and I sobbed and I grieved and I allowed that to go, it changed my entire frequency. It changed the way I was able to see everything within me and around me, because I was like, oh, well, then what does it matter? Well, now I can just totally like enjoy this as the illusion that I am, and do and help others remember this too, because by the way, now I can see how we perpetuate ourselves by these things that we try to deny. We try to deny ourselves the darkness. We try to deny ourselves that, the facets that we've created. One of the sessions we did on our retreat a couple weeks ago, we were working with somebody who saw this black diamond within them, that they had, and it was to reinsert that within themselves. And I saw it as the most beautiful, incredible thing, and they had such a distaste for it. It was almost like repulsion, like, oh no, I don't want to do this. And it was like, but it's time to do it. And they fought it and they judged it, and it was like this whole love of stuff, like, because we sit there, and when I say to you, we love the suffering, we love the pain and exclusion, we love the victimhood that we've created in this density and separation. Many say, oh no, I don't. And it's like, but you do. Because if you didn't, it's almost like, there's a saying that I use from somebody that I followed that I can't even remember where it came from, but it's perfect. It's, having is evidence of wanting. If we create our reality, which we do, having anything in our reality is evidence of wanting. So if I'm suffering, if I'm a victim to anything or whatever, it's because I chose it. Because I chose to think that, oh, I'm going to have the best lesson by doing it this way. And we do in separation enjoy that sensation, the sensory experience that we create with all these emotions and exclusions. And some of them, and by the way, it goes the other direction in terms of joy and ecstasy and, bliss, in terms of like roller coasters and highs and lows and whatever. But the thing is, we don't feel, and that was the part of the duality, the reason that we were creating duality. So when we can look at it that way, it's not that we don't feel that outside, but I think it's even greater than any of that when we're outside of it, because we're in that wholeness again. And we know that all of that is within us. All of that potential is there, is created and destroyed simultaneously when we truly get to that place of existing in a transcendent state. So it's a continuous journey of remembrance, a continuous journey of commitment to be observant to all of that within you. When you have any exclusionary thought, word, or deed about yourself, about others, about any situation, any idea of victim, realize you've created that and know that it's you. And to say, okay, well, look at that. Why would I have created that? Like, oh, and thank you for being there. Thank you for having me created that, so that I can now see what I've forgotten about this within myself. And what do I do when I let go of all of that? Because guess what? What do we base our identity in? All of that separation, exclusion, and we do, and hierarchy, right? That's what we create our identity in. That I'm not worthy because because I feel like because I believe in this, I'm separate from God or the wholeness or divine consciousness. And when you believe you're separate, then you believe you're in lack in some way, shape, or form, that you couldn't possibly be all that. So when we start to look at all that kind of stuff and say, oh, but I'm just forgotten, and how brilliant that I've created this incredible partition that caused me to forget it, then it changes the energy, right? And to say, okay, well, I'm that powerful. I can pull out the partition and still stay the individual at the same time, for the time being, and see what creates that. That's why the ego is so desperate to hold on to separation. And it's funny because we talked about this on Monday on Ascended World as well. Again, I do recommend you go over and watch that over to Ascended World. But when we talk about oneness and wholeness, and yet we vilify it in the same way. One of the biggest ones I talked about this on Monday is the Borg and Star Trek, right? And how many times we've vilified something that says, oh, assimilate or be destroyed. Well, when we go back to the wholeness, we do destroy our individuals, our individual self, because that's the ego is a part of it, and we don't really destroy it, but we just sort of assimilate it back in. And it doesn't really exist. It's part of the illusion of separation anyway. So the challenge is when many use the term, unify and one world, one mind, all kind of stuff, and it's usually on the subversive motivation of dominance in one way, shape, or form, which is ego perpetuation. It's when we say, oh, well, we're all part of the same thing anyway. And that truly means that there's nobody that is better or worse than anybody else. That means that we're allowing ourselves to be part of the whole. That changes the energy entirely. So when we come to things through that and through that consciousness, then we finally break this cycle of perpetuating our own victimhood, perpetuating our own separation, perpetuating this existence which we've loved and we've fallen in love with. And that's another egoic kind of term. Like, we believe it makes us, like better or different and all that stuff. Again, separation, energy, emotions. And so we have immersed ourselves so much we don't want to leave it. That part of us in divine consciousness that has chosen to be the creators and experimenters here, so to speak. So on that, this week I want you to look at that within yourself and start saying, okay, so what is it within me that I'd be terrified to let go of? Or what are the things I'm holding in my closet that I'm embarrassed or ashamed to bring out front? Because those are the things to make a priority to bring out front, to look out front and center, to acknowledge, to embrace, and in doing that, then allowing to come back into the whole, come back into the fold, because then it has no power over you anymore, and nobody can have any power over you anyway once you accept all that, and then you can truly be authentically your divine self, that exudes that wholeness while you're still finishing up in individuality. Yeah. So lots of stuff to process on that. So thank you for joining me. Go chew on that for a little bit. And we'll see you next week. And this is Angela Coulter signing off on this week's Living the Shift. Have a great one.